Hello everyone, welcome back to this My Comprehensive Guide to Jungle. First off, I'm going to start off with an apology. I didn't upload anything yesterday because, unfortunately, I was updating my graphics drivers, and because it didn't work the first time, I had to uninstall them, reinstall them a second time, and then the second time I had to do the factory reset, or the settings factory reset, and then I had to rework my settings, and I had to reconfigure the whole McCoy. I didn't wind up having enough time to record anything. So that's why there was no uploads yesterday. But now that I have that out of the way, I intend on doing a kind of multi-part series here in the SMITE Comprehensive Guide here for a couple of reasons. First off, Miles Horton requested Bacchus Jungle. Now, I've maintained, and will continue to maintain for the duration of my natural life, that with practice and experience, you can 100% use any character in any role. And I stand by that. However, Bacchus Jungle does have some very serious weaknesses and flaws with that. And since Vortraz also was looking for a more comprehensive conversation about jungle, what I'm going to do with this multi-part series is go through, well, here's jungling overall, and this is what you will see with a non-assassin jungler like Bacchus, and here's the difference with a assassin jungler, and going through jungling that way. Now, to just head right off into it, as a jungler, when you're at the god selection screen, and more specifically the loading screen, you're going to be looking at the people in the various roles and trying to figure out, well, who's going to have a problem, who will I need to keep an eye on, and I'm not seeing anything that stands out. I will be curious to see where the Uller goes. I suspect he's going to go into the solo lane as a guess. If he does, then that's going to... what I'll have to do is just make sure as the game progresses, he remains down, that he doesn't get really beefy strong, because Osiris will probably win... Well, he should win that fight early on, but I suspect that later on in the game, when the Uller starts to build up his power and deal damage from the mid to late game, he's going to be a more serious threat. So towards the end of the laning phase, I might want to consider slapping him down with a gank or two just to make sure that he doesn't switch over to the mid to late game as smoothly as maybe he would like. So I've kind of made that mental note, but otherwise there's no other groups that really stand out to me as being particularly noteworthy from a jungling perspective. With the exception of Osiris, everyone has an escape, so that's not too big of a concern. No one's playing out of role, so that's not a particular concern, except, of course, the Uller, which is why we're going to have to keep an eye on that, if I'm right. Now, there's two starts. The classic start is the speed start, because this is the most logical. There, you go from speed to damage to mid. This is nice. This is streamlined. Everyone knows this. Another start that I've seen is damage. That's messy, because sometimes the hunter will join you, sometimes the support will join you, sometimes it's just you in mid. And then after the damage camp is cleared, sometimes you're going to go to the mid lane, sometimes you're going to go to the speed buff, and it's incredibly messy and not really consistent. And if you're a non-assassin jungler like Bacchus, if you start at the damage buff, and then even if you go back to speed buff immediately, if the enemy is an assassin, they're going to get there a little faster than you, they're going to get their speed buff a little faster, they're going to start running a little faster right away, they're going to get all of that done just slightly ahead of you, and you're going to be behind right away before you even meet in lane. Which is, of course, problematic, and something you really don't want at all. So, I just avoid the damage start if possible, because it just really never works out, and like I expected, the Osiris, I thought he was going to juke that, but he did not. The Osiris is going to have that early game advantage compared to the Uller. Now, this is a rare opportunity. We don't technically need to kill him here. He blinked out. If she doesn't get him, then we're just going to leave that. The reason why I don't need to kill him is because for a jungler, to get them that low is good enough, because all I'm really trying to do is prevent them from being able to gank anyone. And that's particularly significant for certain junglers. Sunbots is one of these. Ravon is another one of these. What am I talking about? Well, junglers can broadly be classified in one of two versions: gank junglers and farm junglers. Which one is which really depends on their kit, really. It comes down to their kit. Can you increase their move speed through their kit? If yes, or if they have a natural boost of move speed like Mercury, they're going to be a farming jungler most likely. They do better at farming than they do at ganking because they can bounce from camp to camp faster. Assassins like Hunbots and Ravan, who don't have any way of increasing their move speed, but have a lot of abilities that do damage, and they do a lot of damage in general, these are gank junglers. They get a lot of their golden experience from having really good ganks. Now, it would have been nice to have killed Hunbots there, but you'll notice that I dropped the pursuit right, as soon as he became relatively out of reach, because I had accomplished my minimum goal there, which was to just get him pretty low enough where he would either have to back, losing time, or he would not be able to gank if he decided to stay out and continue fighting. And again, for a gank jungler like Hunbots, that second option is just as significant a problem as dying, at least in the early game. Does he have... Yeah, he's not going to need the mana buff if he doesn't want to then. Alright. So, alright, I'm going to have to now pay a little more attention to left lane, but that's fine. So, what it comes down to basically is... I'm not sure if Hunbots actually ganked that or not. But now that I've seen that the dual lane has been completely wiped out, I will need to lean on that. I will probably want to gank that myself at some point in the near future. I'm going to go ahead and drop this damage buff. And then we're going to see what's going on over there. The Bacchus is still up, so is the Charybdis. We're level 5, which is really good. Now, I'm 2 levels ahead of Hunbots because he almost died earlier. I'm guessing he tried to stay up, almost died to a camp, and then he backed. Oh, Charybdis is still... Alright, we're going to have to gank this. Now, I say we're going to have to gank this because they're low on health, they're pushing up. Bacchus is more specifically low on mana. Alright, that wasn't quite the ideal. I would have liked to have killed him. That would have been really nice for me. But I did force him back, which is good enough. I'm going to leave them to that. I really don't want to be draining experience off of that lane. And this is something else that I see almost nobody else really talk about, is when do you go into a lane and siphon experience? And that really comes down to if they're ahead or not. Right now, because Xiblanque and Ymir both died in dual lane, they're both going to be a little bit behind. Not by much, but a little bit behind. I could have split that purple buff with them, but I didn't want to because I know that both of them were a little behind and they needed the experience and gold a little bit more than I did. I'm ahead right now, so I don't need to siphon off of anyone right now. If I were behind, I would be much more interested in siphoning a little bit off of someone who is more ahead. In this particular case, that would probably be Osiris. I know he's killed Uller. He's probably like half a level and a certain amount of a decent amount of gold ahead of him. Let me see, 3,000. Yeah, he's got a bit of an advantage. Now, that's not going to happen. If I'd been not looking at my scoreboard there, that would have been fine. Now, the reason why Hunbots came back here to steal that is because he is behind in experience. He's trying to prevent me from catching up. That's not really going to work because he doesn't have the move speed to pull that off. He's just spent some time back here, farther away from his own camps. You're going to see that that's not really going to have much of an impact on our experience difference here. A slight one, yes, but not too significant, to be honest. It's a very small difference he's made there. And again, because he now does have to travel farther back to his own jungle, there is going to be that disadvantage for him as well. So, really, unless you are a farming jungler, going into the enemy jungle and stealing their farm is not often going to help you, unless the enemy jungler dies, either right before or right after you steal their farm, then it makes a difference. But in this particular case, Hunbots didn't kill me, and I was at no risk of dying in that particular circumstance, so his efforts to steal my camps at this point mean very little. Now, this is a good gank for Hunbots, in theory. There we go, and now he has just been slapped down. That gives me an absolutely huge advantage. I'm just going to go ahead and poke him. I'm not really interested in killing him. I don't need to. This is one of those situations where I don't have anything to fight for right now, so I'm just not going to. There's no camps on this side of the field that I need to be fighting for. Osiris is bullying Uller. I'm going to have to keep an eye on that because the Uller is getting very aggressive justifiably because he is ahead. But I am going to want to keep an eye on that, make sure Hunbots doesn't gank him. Hunbots actually is in a good position to gank because he will be coming back fresh pretty soon. So this is something I'm going to want to watch here. But Osiris really doesn't look like he's going to have any kind of serious problem there. I'm going to go ahead for these mid-harpies. I now have something to fight for. I'm going to warn him that possibly we're going to see... Yep, there's everyone. And now we're going to go and participate in that. I want to see if... Nope. Alright. Now, why didn't I need to rotate earlier? Because my mid lane was coming over there, so that made the numbers even. I could try to pursue Hunbots, but that's not going to happen, not right now. There we go. Now I'm going to steal the blue buff, because I know Uller is very mana needy, so if I can steal this, that would be pretty huge. Oh, that was a good play. He saved that really well. Gonna go ahead and activate a health potion here. Hunbots. Okay, what Hunbots is doing right now is a secondary job of junglers that I also don't really see people talk about, which is covering a lane. As a jungler, if one of your laning allies isn't in lane, either because they died, they backed, whatever, it is actually your job to hold that lane and make sure that not too many minions are lost to the tower or anything like that. Because it's better for the jungler to take that farm than for it to just be lost to the tower and for the tower to take all that damage as well. So that is part of your job. This is something that not a lot of people talk about, and some people don't even know, because I have seen and also been yelled at as a jungler for holding a line or defending a tower when the laning person there did not have any kind of way of getting there to hold the tower themselves. But that is part of your job as a jungler, so don't let anyone tell you otherwise, because somebody needs to cover that tower, and if it's not going to be the jungler, then no one else is going to be around to do so. Yeah, he's probably going to be... Oh, here he is. He's looking for my farm. He's... Not only is he... Good play. Now, I've, again, accomplished minimally what I need to out of that, which is, at the very least... Go on. Do your jump. There you go. That's just Bacchus. He'll need to get out of there, because Bacchus can and will kill him, but... What I need is this mana buff right here. From the totem. He is not going to be able to steal this. He doesn't do enough damage here. My goodness. I don't really... Oh, yeah, okay. We're not going to really chase this. I don't need to chase this. We're going to go ahead and siphon a little bit off of Osiris here. He is, again, very ahead of Uller. Holy cow, he's 2 levels ahead. He could easily spare that golden experience. Okay, good. And now we're just going to go on ahead and clear these. I'm going to have to back after this because I am not going to have the mana to stay out. And I need mana. So, at this particular point, I now know I can pretty much safely ignore right lane unless Osiris is in some kind of hyper-aggressive position or there's just a large number of people I anticipate going over there. One of the two. Now, I'm building Ravon damage-wise, ability-wise, because that's right now in the meta the stronger option. I'm going to get a Sentry Ward, and that's about it. Again, it's fairly easy to counter crit builds and auto-attack builds in general. And the enemy team really isn't the kind of enemy team that I would... Well, actually, it kind of is. I could probably build crit pretty safely. I just don't want to because I just prefer Ravon with the ability-based damage. Now we're going to have to come over here and gank this because we are seeing some issues here. Ah, it hit the wall. Alright, that's unfortunate. I didn't technically need to dive that, in all honesty, but... yeah, he's going to be ahead of me now because I went on ahead with that. I should have been farming instead. Yeah, I double-worded that without need, but... because I was busy looking at where I was going to go next. Now, because of that gank, you'll notice Hunbots has kind of caught up to me. That's fine. Okay, so Xiblanque doesn't need the help right now. Xiblanque is wicked ahead of Tribus as well, so we're going to have to keep a note of that. Again, he's going to be one of those lanes where we're not going to need to gank that unless I anticipate he's about to be ganked. And at this point now, we're going to have to play the predictive game. Hunbots is over there. I'm not too surprised, but there was no way I was going to be able to get over there anyways. He killed Hunbots, which is absolutely huge for me. That's the interesting thing about gank junglers that I actually want to talk about really quick that is a potential risk. You see, gank junglers, if they fail a gank like that, that is extremely bad for them. Alright, he is going to be much farther behind because now, even though I'm not normally good at farming, I have all the time in the world to do so. Alright? I don't want this fight yet. I want to go back and grab my Soul Eater. And then we're going to save up for Heartseeker first stage. Now, anyways, back to the point. When we're talking about lanes ahead, you're going to go from, oh, I need to gank this lane because the enemy is pressuring them, to, oh, my allies are wicked ahead. I need to now predict where the enemy jungler is going to gank and try to counter gank. Right, so right now, Osiris is looking very aggressive. I know Xiblanque is safe. He's way the hell back there, so I know he's not going to get ganked, fairly obviously. But Osiris is in a position where we could see Hunbots come over here. So I'm going to want to hang around right jungle for a little while and see if... oh, look, here he is. Exactly what I was talking about. He's over here because he was thinking about ganking Osiris. That is what he was thinking. He was thinking about it, and so here he is. Now, that's why I hung out over here. I was anticipating Hunbots would be looking for a gank here. Osiris was on their half of the field. Osiris did not have full health, which you normally wouldn't want to gank that, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Hunbots is starting to get a little desperate, especially since he's, for some bizarre reason, building Transcendence, which is a problem I'm going to talk about. That's a huge error on his part, and I'm going to talk about that later. Okay, we have a massive gank over here on left that I was not anticipating, but I should have. Why should I have anticipated this? Well, once the enemy team saw Ymir and I in right lane, they probably would have immediately gone over here to try to stomp down Xiblanque, which is exactly what they did do. Now, what I'm going to prioritize Tribus for the very specific reason of we just lost our ADCs. So whenever you lose a laning ally, you want to try to take out the enemy of that same classification first, just so that way the laner who just died doesn't fall too far behind. You want to prioritize that person. So right in that fight, I saw that Discordia and Tribus were both low, but we also just lost Xiblanque. So I wanted to make sure that Xiblanque wouldn't fall too far behind by immediately killing okay, this is the point at which Ullr is converting he's getting his power up, and he's actually going to be a threat to Osiris now. So we're going to have to start leaning on that lane like I mentioned earlier. This is that point. That kill just proves that. He's going to lose the tower, that's fine. Ymir is going to try to gank that, I'm not sure why. That's not a good decision, yeah. Anyways, so at this particular point in time, I'm going to have to start leaning on right lane because Ullr has made that conversion. This is not unusual. This is pretty standard of ADCs in the solo lane. This is very normal. No, we don't need to surrender this. Why would you? Because Osiris is upset he got killed by the Ullr. Alright. That's kind of nonsense, but he's ahead for Pete's sakes, but okay. Anyways, so we're going to have to make sure that Ullr does not make that recovery that he's trying to right now, because again, this is standard form for ADC solo laners. So we're going to have to... okay, Osiris is back over there. We're going to just clear this damage buff, and then we're going to go over there and gank Uller. Oh, actually, I'm going to go back first, so that way I can get my mana back. And then we're going to go over there. We're going to grab this really quick. We're going to grab a really quick Sentry Ward, and off we... I need to get my Blink. There we go. And off we go. Now, again, you'll notice that this is why the Uller is really pressing on this. Who is that over there? Is that the enemy's support? Yes, that's Bacchus. Alright, I wasn't expecting Bacchus to come over there. But fair enough, I suppose. And Discordia's over here. Alright, scare her off. I kind of timed that well. Everyone's over here. Okay. That's interesting. Wow. Alright, that went south very quickly. Because we weren't coordinated enough. Good. Okay, we took out Bacchus, but I want the Uller. Oh, shoot. I did not see Discordia there. That's going to be... Okay, Hunbot's dying, which... He didn't get... Nobody got any credit for that, so that's a little unfortunate. But it's good enough at the time being. You'll notice I'm still going to be ahead of him by a decent amount. 400 gold, a level. That's fine. At this particular point now, we're switching over to the late game. All right, we're making that conversion. It's a very low-scoring game, 12 to 10. That doesn't really make a difference. At late game, we're starting to see people team up, team fight. I'm kind of surprised they initiated the team fights that early, but that doesn't matter to us as a jungler. The fact is, we're now looking at team fights. So now we're going to have to switch out of farming and gank mode, and now we're going to have to start eyeballing specific targets for future team fights. And right now, our priority target is going to be Uller. He's starting to really, come up and get really beefy. Osiris is taking the right-hand jungle. As a jungler, you might have a problem with that, but that is the correct decision for Osiris. Alright, he is behind at this point. I am a little ahead of Hunbot's. Not as ahead as I'd like to be for that to be happening, but I am ahead. And Osiris does need the farm at this point, so that is not actually a problem. That is what should be happening. Now, I'm not really surprised that Hunbot's is ganking that, because they're going to try to push Uller as their main source of damage. I'm going to try to get over there as quickly as possible, but I'm not sure I can make it. No. He was pushing too hard on that for what his level was. He really was. He shouldn't have been that aggressive on the Uller. Once the Uller got past a certain point, he should have just left it be. No, we don't want this fight. We want to farm a little bit. We are in a precarious position. We are ahead in experience, but behind in gold. We need gold. We need to take this a little slower than what we're doing. And that's what our problem is right now. I'm going to try to farm. I'm also going to be looking for opportunities to kill Uller, because he's the big problem right now, but I'm not sure I can at this point. There's Uller. Okay, they're going for the Gold Fury. This might be an interesting opportunity. We might be able to do something with this. Discordia isn't there, however, which is somewhat of a problem. Impressive steal. There we go. 2 kills there. Excellent. Heal up off this wave a little bit here. Oh, good play, good play. Got it. There we go. We can... Yes. We committing to this? Alright, we are. That's a good decision. There we go. I don't want to be tanking this, but I'm not. Okay. Now, that was huge. Now, why did we win at that? There were a couple of things. We could have done a little bit better if... shout out to Ymir, by the way. That was excellent decision-making. Really good timing. Beautiful gameplay out of Ymir. Absolutely, the Ymir made that possible. But why did we win that? Oh, the Discordia just quits? I'm doubting that's a rage quit. I suspect that's probably a disconnect. But let's pause this really quick and let's see if we can get this pause vote going here. Because I don't think that was a rage quit. There we go. All right, let's talk about that fight while we have this pause. So we won that for two reasons. One, we were all alive when the enemy team went for... Anyways, we were all alive when the enemy went for the Gold Fury, and they were not all completely healthy. The Hunbots was really low on health at the start of that. I think the Tribdus was half dead. It was either the Tribdus or the Discordia. The Bacchus was already 3/4 health when they started that. They weren't at peak condition already, and we were all alive. And two of us, Osiris and Discordia, were absolutely fresh. Okay? That is why we won that fight. Okay? That is very specifically why. It was just a combination of those two factors that caused them to lose that fight. They should not have tried that with all of us alive, and with that on... they shouldn't have tried that with all of us alive and them being at that level of health and mana, collectively as a team. Absolutely should not have happened. That was terrible decision-making by whoever made that call. I'm not sure who on their team is making those calls, but that was very bad decision-making. I want to kill Uller here, and I think I can, because I see Hunbots over there. He might be coming over now. Hi. How you doing? Again, I'm prioritizing Uller because right now, based on how the mid-game went, he's the big threat on the field right now. I'm not too concerned about Bacchus here. I just have to not hit him. Okay, that's bad. Okay, good. Now you'll notice that I am really slapping now. I'm getting really beefy. I'm actually going to pretty soon be able to start pub stomping people. Discordia's going to get very aggressive with this. Now I don't need to be in mid lane because that's Hunbots versus 2. I think that's Hunbots versus Osiris, and yeah, actually he just potentially got away. I think I can come over here and stop that. Yeah. Good play, good play. She played that really well. But we get Boomba's Spear. And at this particular point, I can basically grab whatever else I want. I have plenty of cooldown. I have all the cooldowns I need. I'm going to probably go for the Crusher just because Ravon's auto attacks are also fairly nice. Like I said, he can play ability or auto attack. So I'm going to go for the Crusher. That'll give me some nice ability damage. That'll give me some nice attack speed. It's something we're really going to want. The Discordia's return, so, you know, we're back on track here with that. Now, at this particular point, I am so grossly ahead of Hunbots that he's not going to be able to really stop me. That's fine. It's not really technically his job to do so. He's building like a lunatic, which is part of the reason why. I'm still going to be looking at getting that Uller dead each time before team fights, because again, he is the big threat on the board right now. The Discordia is starting to become a problem, but that's very standard for mages in the late game with the team fights. That's not too unusual there. So we're just going to go right on ahead and grab the speed buff. At this point, I really don't need jungle camps except to trigger Boomba's Spear. Give me that 10% power boost. The only real thing you'll want at this point is going to be very specifically the speed buff. It's unfortunate that he lost to that, but he was pretty close. And, you know, on your way to a fight, you might want to kill something so you can rejuvenate that boost. She just wiped out both of those, so that's fine. There's a Bacchus in right lane. Uller's dead. I don't really have anything else going on, so I might as well try to kill Bacchus. There's some bots. I've lost track of Bacchus, so we're not going to really waste any time on that. There's bots. I don't think they're going to need my help there. Can I take the Pyromancer by myself? Oh, yes, definitely. This is easy. This is partially because I'm so far ahead at this point that I can just easily solo that. We're going to try to take out Bacchus here. Take that for the damage boost. There we go. Now, I don't actually want to fight Bacchus here, to be honest. Oh, but I can kill him. Oh, no, I can't. Because here's Discordia. And she just ulted me, which is fairly understandable. Alright, but at the very least, I did take out Uller. I would have liked to have taken out Discordia, or at least not died to her. That's a bit of a... That was a mistake on my part. I overstayed. I really... Once I killed Uller, I should have backed right out of there. That was an error on my part. I got really cocky, and I overstayed. Which, I mean, is going to happen. I don't care how practiced you are as a jungler. At some point, you're going to do something silly like that. I'm going to go on ahead and... do I really want Hydra's Lament, honestly? How much is their healing? Do I need anti-heal? I don't need anti-heal. I'm just not going to need it. I really can't think of anything else I would want other than Hydra's Lament just for huge power spikes. I mean, they only have one serious tank, so it's not like I need any more than the 30% pen that I already have. Yeah, we're just going to go for... The hell with it, we're just going to go for Hydra's Lament. It's going to overstack my cooldowns, that's fine, I don't really care. At this point, I'm going to be really honest, it's not going to make a difference. Now there's Uller in right lane, they're taking Gold Fury. I'm going to be looking for Uller and for the enemy Discordia. Okay, they cleared that, I expected they would. There's Uller. Where's the enemy Discordia, I would like to know. I'm going to see if we can take him out. He's still level 18, so we're going to try to keep him from getting any more golden experience. Okay, my allies are talking about the Fire Giant, which is fine. Okay, he's out. He got out very successfully. And he's dead. Okay, good. Just to take him out immediately. Now we've started the Fire Giant, so I timed that pretty nicely. I think Osiris is a little early on starting this. I would have liked our allies to be a little bit closer at hand before this was started. But, alright. That is a priority target right there. We're going to take that out. Okay, there she goes. Kill him. Okay, I don't want to chase Bacchus. We don't need to chase Bacchus. We're fighting for the Fire Giant. We have it. We have the Fire Giant. They're overcommitting. Just take the Fire Giant, please. I'm going to take this so I can get a damage boost with my Boomba Spear, but other than that, it also heal a little bit. We're just going to go ahead and take this really quick. There we go. We can take that tower easy. This is an easy tower take. Come on. Uller's back up. There's Uller, actually. That's fine. Nice. Oh, nope. He got out. No, he didn't. Never mind. Oh, we've got no problem taking that. All right. Now, we can safely push this tower because, honestly, we have the Fire Giant buff. We are wicked ahead as a team. Good. We have the catapult to attack the tower from a safe distance. The Phoenix, technically, actually. Good play, good play. Oh, he's going in on this. I walked right into that. Walked right into all of that. I died because I walked literally into everything. Because I wasn't paying enough attention, apparently. Osiris is split pushing for some reason. Does he have the pen for that? He doesn't. Okay, that's an interesting decision. But, I mean, it worked, but not exactly what I would have gone for at that particular moment. Would have been nice to have him around in the right lane, but okay. So, as you can see in the late game, basically what happens is the train of thought for junglers is, in the early game, okay, these are the lanes that I'm going to need to pay attention to because they have no escape, so they're going to get heavily ganked, or they're out of role and they need that early game boost, or, things of that nature, right? It's going to be pretty important for you to pay attention to that in the early game. In the mid game, you're starting to switch out of that. You're starting to think about, all right, so are there any laning people who I might need to lean on right before we switch over to the team fight phase? And Uller was one of these, as I mentioned earlier. I probably should have leaned on him a little bit heavier. I was a little late on that. I didn't start ganking him early enough. I waited a little bit too long on that. So that was my fault. I waited just a bit too long on that. That's why he had that brief moment where he was doing really well. Yeah, that's because I was a little late to that party. And then in the late game, we're picking out individual targets and saying, hey, this person needs to be dead all the time. Usually this is going to, at minimum, include the enemy mage. There are exceptions to this. For example, if the enemy mage is an ADC, that's less of a concern. And you're just dead. Oop. There we go. And Bacchus has goofed. Hold on. Okay, good. Now I need to kill this for the healing. Look how much I heal, by the way, when I clear jungle camps. If you, as a jungler, have Boomba's Spear, just clear a jungle camp. That's all you need to do. Boomba's Spear also gives you a 10% power boost, which doesn't sound like much until you realize that's, at this point for me, that was like 30 damage. Alright, so that's... This episode is more about the mindset of junglers, the kind of things you need to be paying attention to. Now, I've heard people talk about pathing. I don't talk about pathing. You may have noticed I did not talk about pathing. This is because, in my 7 years of smiting, I have yet to see consistent pathing work. Alright, I want you to understand pathing is a match-by-match thing. The only thing I will say about pathing, and the only thing you will ever hear me say firmly about pathing, in terms of jungling, is you should be trying your best to stay in the jungle, the side of the jungle where they need the most help. When I was talking about, expecting Hunbots to gank Osiris in the right lane, in the mid game, and I discovered him trying to take out the Naga in Osiris' side of the jungle. If you remember that, I was on that side of the jungle specifically because I was expecting that. If you're expecting the enemy jungler to go somewhere for a gank, very specifically, and you're ahead, be on that side. Be on that side of the jungle. Path there. Other than that one thing that I will say about pathing, there's nothing else you really can say about it, because pathing is such an individual match-by-match thing, other than the very first few minutes of the match where you're going from speed to damage to mid lane. Beyond that, your pathing is going to be unique to every match, depending on your needs, the needs of your team, etc. Anybody who tells you, oh, this specific pathing works, BS. That's a match-by-match thing. Okay, I want to just lay that down. Again, the only thing that you really need to know about pathing is your pathing, whatever it happens to be for that match, should try to keep you on the side that you anticipate needing the most help. If you're ahead, you want to be on the side you anticipate your enemy to be on. If you're behind, you want to try to anticipate what side the enemy will be on and be on the opposite side to do something else while they're doing a gank. Sometimes, unfortunately, you do just have to sacrifice your allies. And that's actually something that Hunbots was having a hard time doing in the mid-game very specifically when he was behind, is just staying away from the side that I would normally want to be on, or the side that he would expect me to be on. When I went to the right jungle because I anticipated he would gank the Osiris, he needed to gank the Osiris because the Uller was just at that point starting to get online and be able to put up a good fight against Osiris. That is actually the point. Once I killed Hunbatz there, I should have continued on to the right lane to try to get Uller dead. That is when I should have started leaning on Uller. Alright, or at the very least, if I didn't kill Uller, I should have at least forced him to retreat or back or something. And I didn't. And that was the point at which I really should have done that, because Hunbatz only needed that gank because Uller was in a position where he could have contested Osiris at that point, okay? But that's all I'm really going to say about pathing, because honestly, again, this is hyper important, and a lot of people spout a lot of malarkey about this. Pathing is match by match. It is unique every time. Okay? You should know the timers of the camps, because you should be able to estimate, alright, so I'll clear this, and then I'll go for a gank, and then a minute later, I'll, or 2 minutes later, or whatever, depending on the camp, I'll come back here and I'll clear this again. Things like that. You should know those timers, but you shouldn't necessarily, set up a path for yourself that you're going to follow every single stinking time, because maybe you die one time. Maybe a gank takes a little longer than you're expecting. Maybe you start a gank, it goes south, and you just leave the gank. Maybe the enemy jungler is feeling particularly nuts and takes some of your camps. You have no idea. Maybe the enemy jungler is better at farming and can steal your farm safely and does so. Maybe the enemy jungler is a ganker and they fail a gank, so you have an opportunity to take some of their jungle for free. Your pathing will change every time, match by match. Alright, there will be some matches where you kind of feel like you've been down that road before, because it's pretty close to a previous match where you path a particular way and you're pathing that way again because it works, whatever. But that's still a match-by-match thing, because there's going to be mild differences. You're 30 seconds later this time than last time. You're, whatever. So whenever someone tells you, oh, this specific pathing works, laugh at them. It's the one time I'll accept laughing at them, because pathing is too individual for that. Alright? Now, I do want to talk briefly in this episode about gank junglers and farm junglers. And I'm going to stick with the assassins here, because they're primarily what you're going to be using to jungle. I'll tackle non-assassin junglers on a case-by-case basis, but a lot of these junglers are really primarily gank junglers, alright? Arachne is a fairly interesting case where if you are good with Arachne, she's both. She is equally as effective ganking as she's farming the jungle, alright? If you're bad with Arachne, or at the very least even just mediocre with her, she's a gank jungler. Why is this? Her spiders, very specifically, the web, creates a very unique opportunity for Arachne as a jungler. You can throw a web down at the entrance to a jungle camp for your allies, and your spiders will help them, and you'll get the assist experience for that. They fixed that. You now get that assist. That is fantastic. That gives her technically the biggest reach as a jungler in the game on a technical level. And if you really understand Arachne well enough, you can really take advantage of this and farm even when you're not even on that side of the jungle. It takes a ton of practice to do this. I only know... Well, let me rephrase that. I've only heard of one person, one of the developers, being that good with Arachne. I'm pretty good with Arachne. She is one of my favorite assassins. And I can do this some of the time, but I am not good enough to be able to pull this off consistently. Alright? But it is, if you really practice with her, she has such incredible reach. And of course, because of her passive here, Predator, this gives you an absolutely astounding ability to wipe out people very quickly. I have gotten pentas with Arachne because of Predator and just builds, and nowadays she's a bit on the down. She's down a little bit. She's not as good as she used to be, mostly because of itemization. It's easier to counterattack. It's easier to counter auto-attacking assassins nowadays. This isn't a good meta for auto-attackers, so it is rough for her. But keep in mind that at least on paper, she is incredible and has the ability to farm in places she's not even visible from, right? You can also use her webs to slow down enemy clearing as well. You can put this web at the entrance to enemy camps as well and really cause havoc there, or put webs in specific parts of the jungle where you anticipate the enemy jungler to be and start harassing them. This ability here gives Arachne as a jungler a lot of weird utility that takes a lot of practice and a lot of experience to really fully understand. And again, I've been playing this for 7 years. Well, I haven't been playing Arachne for 7 years, but I've been playing the game for 7 years, and I've practiced a lot with Arachne, but I still can't pull this off consistently. I would love to, and I will one day try to get to that point of experience with her. But she is... When you get to that point, you're going to be excruciatingly difficult to defeat. Again, the meta, as it is right now, really makes this difficult. More difficult than normal. But given the right meta, you won't be able to lose, right? It is worth practicing with her for this, if you're willing to dedicate that level of time and effort to do so. But she can, again, depending on how good you are with her, she either is a gank jungler or she's both. Now, Wheelish is a really interesting thing. She's mostly a farm jungler because she can just hop on Suku here and just blitz all over the jungle, go from camp to camp to camp very quickly, and get a lot of spare time. That spare time is used for ganking. Now, you might say, well, Professor, does that mean that technically she's both? I would say she's both with an asterisk. How good she is at ganking really depends on whether or not you get that first hit. You need that first hit for a really successful gank with a Wheelish, because she dedicates a lot to a gank. Typically, you're going to jump in with Suku, which also removes your escape. You then are going to Feather Step, which typically puts you behind the enemy, which, while it has its advantages, definitely puts you in a riskier position. And then you're going to probably Moonlight Charge, and if you mistime this, the enemy doesn't pop up and they're getting some extra damage on you there. She's high risk, high reward when it comes to ganking, so she is both, but asterisk on the gank part of that. But it's safest to rely on the farm with her, especially if you're new to a Wheelish. It's safest to consider her a farm jungler and then kind of develop your strats for ganking later on as you get better with her. Bacchus is a gank jungler, and actually a really great example of someone who needs Golden Blade. Alright, Arachne needs Golden Blade as well, but right now the big problem with a lot of auto-attacking junglers is they don't really have any ability to quickly clear camps fast enough. Now, Arachne can use her web for this, potentially, if you level that up first for some reason. And one day I'll do an Arachne episode and talk about that. But Bacchus doesn't even have that. His takedown does some decent damage, but it's not often enough to completely wipe out the smalls for jungle camps, so you are going to need Golden Blade, and that's a setback because Golden Blade is only really useful for assassins, or for junglers, let me rephrase that. Golden Blade is only useful for junglers in the early to mid game, and this is due to, let me actually show you really quick why. So Golden Blade, all basic attacks also hit enemies within a 15 unit radius of the target for 50% of the damage. In team fights, it's not terribly often that Golden Blade hits enemies with this passive. So I tend to sell this in the late game for something else that gives me maybe penetration, maybe it gives me lifesteal, who knows it depends on the individual assassin that I'm playing as. But having to build this and selling this later on really can hurt your ability to impact the game overall, because now you're spending gold on this, and you're spending gold on this because your camp clear is trash, and that makes your early game farming more difficult. Now, I've seen a lot of people just not even sell Golden Blade at all, which is another approach, and that's fine. There's nothing particularly wrong with that. It is just as effective as selling the foolish thing, depending on, again, the assassin. But it is still not going to be as effective as maybe something else would be in the same position. Now, Bacchus is a little resistant to this problem because he is a gank jungler very specifically. So if you get really good with Bacchus, and you get really good at ganking with Bacchus, you can actually theoretically, and keep in mind this is theoretic, skip Golden Blade and use jungle camps as basically a way to heal yourself back up after a gank and just go from gank to gank to gank and taking out jungle camps as you go along from gank to gank. I have seen that done. I've done that a couple of times with him. It's not easy, and again, you kind of have to be on a roll. You have to win that first gank, and you have to be able to roll that gank into a snowball, basically. But it can be done. Bastet, pretty standard. Pretty standard. I want to actually say she's both. I was going to say she was a gank jungler, and she definitely has the ability to do that very easily, but she's technically both, because Pounce not only does a large amount of damage, but she also moves at 25% more speed, so she can really zip around the jungle. You pounce onto a camp, and then you just run to the next camp really quick, clear that very quickly, leap back, and then just switch over to the other side of the jungle. If you pounce correctly, she can use this incredibly effectively to bounce from camp to camp excruciatingly quickly. And just her sheer damage output makes her extremely good at ganking, especially her ult now. Beforehand, she used to have a different ult where she summoned 3 cats, and that was basically it. When her ult was the 3 cats, she was hands down a farm jungler. She wasn't terribly great at ganking, unless she had the element of surprise. I mean, and again, I want to actually reiterate here, just because a jungler isn't a gank jungler doesn't mean they cannot or should not gank. They're just not as good at ganking, nor should they rely on ganking as their primary form of golden experience. It's more of farm versus gank junglers is more a conversation about their primary source of golden experience, not their secondary source. Obviously, as a jungler, you should be ganking viable targets, and you should be clearing the jungle regardless of what kind of jungler you are. But for Bastet, originally, she wasn't as good at ganking as she is now, so ganking was never her primary form of golden experience. But now that she's got the Huntress of Bast, which is way better for ganks, she actually, at least from level 5 onwards, she actually has a strong enough ganking potential where she can very easily be used as a dual-purpose jungler here. She is equally now as effective at farming the jungle as she is at ganking. Very, very nice buff to her. I really was glad that they did that. Camazotz is interesting. I typically play him as a farm jungler, but quite frankly, he's kind of odd as a jungler, because his forte is not in movement speed, nor is it in his ability to deal large quantities of damage to any individual target, at least at the early to mid game. It's just his sustain makes him an unholy a farmer. So his jungle farm is different, where a lot of the other farm-focused junglers have great movement speed or otherwise great movement abilities that they can use to bounce around the jungle and clear camps very quickly, and then take that spare time and gank with it. Camazotz just doesn't go back very often. As long as he doesn't die, there's a really strong chance that he just is hanging around the jungle somewhere, lurking behind the scenes, clearing camps and waiting for a good gank opportunity. If you hate backing as a jungler, he's the jungler for you. It's a very different approach, and it's tough to describe because he's very unique in this aspect. But he outfarms the enemy not by moving faster than them, but by just straight up outlasting them in the jungle. Okay? It's weird, and he takes some getting used to if you're used to farm junglers that farm based on movement speed or movement abilities. He's worth a try. You may not like him. If you play him for, I want to say 5 matches and you hate him, I can understand that. I like him because of the uniqueness of the experience, but he is definitely not for every jungler. If you have a hard time with him, that's not too surprising. He's very different from most farm junglers. He does have an unusually safe gank ability, but he's not any gankier than your average farm jungler. Cleona is very interesting as well because she is a farm jungler because she can phase through walls, which gives her some unique advantages that a lot of other junglers don't have. And if the enemy is positioned correctly, she has some really strong gank potential. But if the enemy is not standing close enough to a wall, then it's a little bit harder to gank with her. So both with another asterisk on the gank there. Daji is straight up... Daji is interesting because she's a farm jungler because she moves really fast with 1,000 cuts, and she can actually activate this, wipe out a camp, and then move on to the next one in the same level of the jungle. But despite that, she is functionally more of a gank jungler because she can teleport with Trickster Spirit 1,000 cuts to maintain the same melee range, and then finish off with a nice horrible burns and just clean up. Also, she's got the Paolao, which gives her unusually high amounts of team fight in the late game. She's interpretive. I'm gonna put it this way. Whether or not you treat her as a farm jungler or a gank jungler is really down to how you play. I typically use her as a gank jungler. I see 1,000 cuts as a farming ability personally, but I personally play her as a gank jungler because that's just how I have found her to be more successful in my personal playstyle. But if you're better at farming as a jungler, then maybe you would want to readjust slightly into kind of leaning in that direction. Now, keep in mind that when I play her, I'm usually building auto attacks. So I'm building an auto attack build with her, which is why I haven't played her much this year. And I use Torture Blades combined with Hastened Katana to stick to enemies and just absolutely obliterate them. And this is why I tend to play her as a gank jungler. If you're going to play her as a farm jungler, I would recommend going ability-based damage, which equally is as effective because all of her abilities deal damage. So that is an equally viable option with her. You just have to make a decision, and that's going to be whichever one you're more comfortable with. I'm going to actually make the observation here that specific shout out to Vortraz. Vortraz mentioned that they were practicing with Serket, and the fact that Vortraz is practicing with Serket, and I'll talk about Serket in a little bit, indicates to me that Vortraz is probably a gank jungler. They're more comfortable with gank junglers because that's what Serket is really good at. And Vortraz has mentioned their mindset going into jungling, and it's very much a gank mindset. So Vortraz, if you ever approach Daji and decide to practice with Daji, you're going to most likely approach her as a gank jungler rather than a farm jungler, and that's totally fine. How you do it is totally up to you. Again, she can play either auto attacks or ability-based damage, and that's totally down to how you decide you want to approach that. But I'm just going to use Vortraz as an example here of a player who would approach Daji a very specific way. Again, this is based on my conversation with Vortraz. Maybe I'm wrong. But that's what I know of Vortraz from our conversations so far. Now, Fenrir is very specifically a gank jungler. There's just no two ways about this. Again, he's like Daji in the fact that he can play either abilities or auto attacks, but he's very specifically a gank jungler. Ragnarok as a ganking ability is just absolutely incredibly useful, and I'm going to be really honest, Fenrir is a little slow in the jungle, but not for the reason you expect. Besides Fenrir not really having a lot of movement speed boosts, and you might be saying to yourself, well, Professor, Ragnarok boosts his move speed, it's right there. Yes, but the reason why this isn't a farm ability, as you can probably guess, is because it's an ultimate. You don't want to use your ultimate in the jungle on camps. You just don't. It's a waste of an ultimate. So, even though Ragnarok does give Fenrir a nice spike in move speed, it's his ultimate. You use this on enemy gods. That's part of the reason why it is a better gank ability, and this is why Fenrir is such a impressive gank jungler. Besides that problem, his primary form of wave clear, or camp clear, depending on how you play, is Brutalize. Very powerful move. Also really extended. This is 4 strikes, and those strikes take a little while to get through. It's kind of slow. Fenrir does not jungle quickly. Unfortunately. But just keep that in mind when playing Fenrir, but Fenrir is definitely a hardcore gank jungler. Fun fact, Fenrir was the first assassin I played, and I played him for 3 straight months. Right after I played Kepri for 3 straight months. Hunbatz is also gank jungler. I talked about this in the previous match, so I'm not really going to heavily talk about this here. But he doesn't really have any abilities that allow him to travel through the jungle particularly quickly. He's got a very standard leap. Most assassins have some form of leap, so it's not particularly standout. And a lot of his, he hits very hard. And Fear No Evil is great in team fights as well, and also for controlling a gank victim. He's definitely, just like Fenrir, just like Ravon, he is very much a gank jungler. Kali is also a gank jungler. This is, again, she's got a very basic jump. Marked for Death really emphasizes her ability to gank a very specific person. Kali is interesting in that Kali doesn't gank based on enemy positioning, like literally every other gank jungler, or every other jungler ever. She ganks based on, is this my target? It's very odd. It takes some adjusting to if you've played literally any other jungler, because your gank decision making is now heavily influenced by who your mark is. Okay? And that takes getting used to. So if you're going to practice with Kali from another jungler, be very mindful of this. That sometimes you're, at least in the early to mid period of time where you're getting to know her, you're getting good with Kali, you're going to have to keep in mind that you're going to make some poor decisions because your mark happens to be somewhere involved in that particular fight, or is not in a prime ganking position, but you really want that mark. Just be aware that it's going to take some getting used to, and you are going to make some bad decisions about that because the mark psychologically makes you more aggressive because, oh, it's my mark, once I kill them, I heal up and I get to roll into, well, yeah, maybe that happens, or maybe you die on the attempt because the mark wasn't in as strong of a gank position as you convinced yourself they were because they were your mark. Psychologically, it's fascinating, but she is definitely a gank jungler. Lancelot, I would have to say, is primarily a farming jungler. Now, I haven't spent a lot of time with him, to be honest, but the fact that he just straight up rides his horse for increased movement speed, very similar to Suku, but he doesn't have Awilish's bonus damage to enemies, makes him unusually good at farming, a little less at ganking. Again, just to reiterate, a farm jungler still does and should gank. I'm not saying just because you're a farm jungler you should never gank, it's just that you shouldn't rely on ganking as your form of experience. And Lancelot just moves fast enough to really make farming easier for him. Loki is a bit of... He's a both. He's both, hands down. He moves very quickly with Vanish, and a lot of his utility actually is the fact that he turns invisible. And that's spooky for a lot of people. If you want to really psych out your enemy with Loki, there's a really interesting trick you can do that I've discovered is unusually effective, and you can sometimes see this very obviously, sometimes it's more subtle and you can't see it. But if you see an enemy pressing on one of your lanes, right? Let's pretend you're in mid lane with your mid laner and you're level, say, 10 or so. You're clearing the wave, and the wave is almost gone, and your mage isn't in any trouble, so you're going to go and clear some jungle camps. But you notice that your ADC is being pressed really hard by theirs. So what you do is you move towards that jungle, and you make sure that the enemy sees you vanishing in front of them while traveling in that direction. They're going to warn their ADC, hey, enemy incoming. And they're going to back off, the enemy ADC. You're, meanwhile, in the jungle just clearing camps and not even going over there. But because you vanished at that time, going in that direction, and the enemy, if they're even a decent player, warned their ADC that you were on the way, you have just psychologically ganked, is what I call this. For free. Your ADC had pressure relief from them, the enemy ADC backed off, and you were able to spend the same amount of time clearing camps and getting more golden experience. Maybe you gank after that camp is done, perhaps, but you didn't need to be there or even actually heading there to psychologically force the enemy back. Alright? just something to think about when playing Loki. And I think Loki is grossly underestimated, and I think the reason why is because a lot of people don't use Loki correctly. You can do a lot with Vanish that a lot of people don't think about. Mercury is a farm jungler. He moves very quickly. He's got fastest god alive. He's got maximum velocity. It's a really lovely time. A maximum velocity primarily because he just has a flat increase in speed. Beautiful time. More than that, I really can't say. He doesn't necessarily need Golden Blade if you really level up Made You Look quickly. Because that's going to be your primary way of getting rid of the smalls, and then you just punch out the main camp enemy there, and that's just absolutely what you should do. He's one of the very few auto-attacking assassins who doesn't technically need Golden Blade. So, just keep that in mind. Naja, gank. 100% gank. He does have some mild ability to increase his move speed, but he doesn't really move that much quicker, so much quicker than that it really helps a lot, because it's only really going to get you, like Daji's ability, it's only going to get you from one camp to the next, and that's about it. So, I suppose an argument could be made that he is technically both, and I can understand if you want to define him that way, but his ult, the combination of Armillary Sash and Windfire Wheels just makes him so good at ganking. I typically consider him a ganker, but that also could just be me from the old days before Universal Ring Toss gave him move speed, because I don't think it always gave him move speed. So that just might be me being old. But yeah, technically he is both. Nemesis, primarily... No, she's a ganker, because, again, her ultimate gives her move speed buff. She doesn't really have a move speed buff besides. She has a fairly standard dash. You slap down Divine Judgment, you wipe out the enemy really quick, and move on. Gank assassin. Pele, primarily due to... Not this one. Magma Rush being able to boost her move speed for an impressive amount of time. She's actually a farm jungler, and one of the very few farm-focused junglers that can't also gank really powerfully. Again, she can gank, and she can gank really well, but it's just not how she should really be focusing on her golden experience gains. Especially since she has a lot of non-mana resources available. She's got 2 Pyroclasts. She's, of course, got the meter for Magma Rush that's separate from mana. She has a lot of resources, so you actually can't gank too often with her. And you also have to make sure that you're ganking with her at the correct time compared to your farm. So you do have to be very careful with your timing on ganks with her, that a lot of other assassins aren't as concerned with, just because, again, of all these extra resources she has. Very powerful, but you have to really understand the timing, and that takes some practice with her first. Atoski we've discussed fairly extensively, very extensively indeed. He is both. Ravon, as we've also discussed previously, he is a gank jungler. He doesn't really... overhead kick, yes, it is a 50% movement speed boost for 1 second. It's not a long enough move speed boost to matter in terms of traversing from camp to camp, so he's really not a farming jungler. He's really a gank jungler. Serket, like I've already mentioned, is a gank jungler. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, she's got 2 move abilities that, you know, allow her to traverse the jungle fairly quickly. Why isn't she a farming jungler, according to your definitions? Well, primarily because 2 move abilities is very expensive mana-wise, so you aren't necessarily always looking to use those to just traverse the jungle. In desperate times, you absolutely will be doing this, but it's not something you want to be doing all the time. And besides the fact, just the amount of damage she can put out with Last Breath, Cobra's Kiss, Deathbane, and Catalyst, that is a huge amount of damage coming out of her on a single target. She is absolutely a fantastic ganker. I think one of the best gankers in the game, to be honest, because her target does not matter. Once she hits level 5, she can gank literally anyone and slap. That is 120% of your physical power as true damage. Protections don't matter. Healing doesn't exist. They are dead as long as they've taken at least enough damage besides. Okay? Hands down, best gank jungler in the game. but very expensive to farm with if you're using both your movement abilities to just traverse the jungle. So you do have to be very careful with your mana management with her. She's the best ganker in the game, but she does require practice to use at her peak. She needs mana management. But absolutely fantastic. Set is, in fact, a very, very interesting case as well. He's a ganker, again, but he's got some abilities. These are more unique to him that I would want to actually go into a match and discuss them with. So I'm just going to go on ahead for this episode and just leave it at he's a gank jungler. We're not going to get into his farming. His farming is a bit weird. Also a gank jungler. Ability-based gank jungler. He teleports in, slaps people, Storm God is out. Gank jungler. Thanatos is a gank jungler. Despite the fact that Scent of Death does, in fact, increase your move speed, his move speed really accelerates when the enemy is within insta-kill range. So when you are using your move speed boost, you're probably boosting your movement speed so you can get to that gank a little faster and kill someone else. That's what his kit is designed around, ganking people. So he's the only real exception to this. Yes, Scent of Death boosts his movement speed. Yes, he does farm very effectively. He's got an AoE on his third attack chain, and he's got the very useful Soul Reap, which also helps him with farming. He is a strong farmer, don't get me wrong, but ganking is his forte. Just his whole kit's designed around that concept. Thor, ganker. Just gank someone with Anvil of Dawn. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Anybody who's ganked with Anvil of Dawn knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's awesome. Tsukiyomi, ganker. You might think to yourself, well, he's got this movement speed steal that he's getting from Dark Moon. Yeah, you need to be hitting an enemy god for that. Alright? That's when you get the movement speed boost. That's a gank. He is a ganker. He is not a farmer. Now, down the road I'm going to get more into the details and more into the weeds individually on why those are farmers or why those are gankers, but I did want to kind of go over that really quick. Next episode I will be talking more about... I might actually just do Bacchus as the next episode, maybe. But I wanted to lay down this groundwork really quick first, because it's very important that we have this kind of groundwork for, okay, here's jungling, and here's some issues with Bacchus. Most of it is with farming. Bacchus, by nature, is going to have to be a gank jungler, and I will be playing him as a gank jungler for that very specific reason. He hits very well. He hits just very, very well. And he just straight up does not... He doesn't move fast enough to really be good at farming, and there is going to be a risk of that, so he is going to be high risk, high reward, like most gank junglers, because if he fails a gank, he's going to fall really far behind, and because he is slower, he's not even going to be able to farm as effectively to recover from that. Alright, that's a conversation we'll have in an episode or two when I'm ready for Bacchus Jungle episode. But I just wanted to lay down this groundwork really quick, just so we could go into the Bacchus episode and say, hey, this is what's going on, this is why this is a good thing, this is why this is a bad thing, etc. So with that being said, thank you all very much for joining me. If you liked this, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, please ignore me. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, suggestions, or requests, please leave them down in the comment section below. And thank you all very much for joining me, and have a great 24 hours.